When understanding why a level of success or failure exists in the world of villainy, it's important, in fact essential, for everyone to remember that it comes down to a few fundamental basic rules, and one of those such rules is the people involved and the roles they play. It can't be said enough how trust and respect of the code is the core, backbone and very essence of what and how we operate successfully in organized crime. And no matter the time, place or generation, there is nothing that will ever supersede what is and will always be the old school ways. But try as they do, there will always be some who feel they can reinvent the wheel, but as much as they always fail, I demonstrate regularly with little or no effort how backwards they are, and if something isn't broken, it doesn't need fixing. But let's not oversimplify things or put the horse before the cart. Instead, allow me to tell you on how the missing man easily highlighted a person's immorality and by equal measure a family's greed, and finally showed their contempt for the same people that protected and made them a lot of money. When it comes to any business deal or practice, the people you employ or allow to be around you, much like strong cogs in a machine, will, to a high degree, guarantee things will always work. But much like a machine, the cogs, their correct alignment and their longevity are only as good as the oiling, maintaining, and the ability of the operator to keep it going. As only a skilled and knowledgeable captain can get a ship in and out of any harbour. I'd long had suspicions, but never concerns, that an Indian family who I'd given a great deal of personal attention and protection to had been short-changing me on some work for a while. But what I didn't know was how the liberty-taking had stretched to such a point, and as a result of their carelessness and greed, a commodity that if exposed, seen or witnessed and under any other circumstances, could have meant a lengthy stretch for one member of a crew and a few bods going missing from the other. But thankfully our firm's guardian angel was looking over us on one such day, and the situation was managed respectively. Now, when and if I'm approached for a price, whether acting in a minding, couriering or brokering capacity, different jobs demand a type and level of service. Thus the job, involvement and attention to detail dictates a price. The difference in a doctor's and engineer's role is as different as the very spelling of the words, as are their abilities and the results you'd expect from them. Basically, you wouldn't send a boy to do a man's job and expect the same results for a different or lesser amount of pay. So when I'm told that a commodity, let's say in this example it's money, I have to make sure things are done properly, as it's my name being stamped on the service provided, plus the people involved have to be of a certain ability and capacity. This is essential, as I've said. If things go sideways and it's shown to be down to my negligence, my name is in question, my income would likely disappear, I myself would become a target, and not to mention the people I have wrapped around me, as I am responsible for their lives. In fact, many I don't view as simple employees, and they're more than just like-minded, trusted people. They're family. It was whilst both Jay and I were enjoying the sun-filled days in Spain, having a few months to top up our tans and enjoy what had been a good year for all of us. But like most parts of my day, I'm interrupted by calls from back home. I really must learn to simply turn that fucking phone off. After a few ignored rings and the reminder from Jay that business we're in doesn't always work a 9 to 5, I answered the phone, and thankfully I did. It was one of the old firm, who for the sake of the story and lesson we'll call Bill. Anything Bill had to say was of value and importance, and for him to be reaching out to me was obviously a call I needed to take. "I need to see you, Carl, and I'm not talking on the phone. You know I hate these things. Is anyone hurt, missing, or is it something that can wait?" was my reply. "I'd rather talk to you in person, and I can be with you in a couple of hours. It's annoying me, and I need to sort this lot out, but I need your blessing." All the while, during the call, I could hear what sounded like a busy airport or train station in the background. I knew for someone as well-mannered and cordial as Bill, emphasizing, "Need to speak with you in person," and "need your blessing." Whatever and whoever it was, this couldn't be good. "Of course, I'll have Jay book a flight and get you out here in a day or so, Bill." "No need. I'm at Heathrow now, and the girl at the ticket counter has just booked my seat. I'll see you in a couple of hours." Then he hung up. Both Jay and I made a few discreet calls back home to see if the wheels had fallen off anything we had on the go, or as a sign of Bill's loyalty, he'd put someone in their place for trying to step out of line, or on my shoes in my absence. But no, in fact everything, including a few extra bits of work and their returns, had ensured we could start looking at bigger premises and less hours in our workday. But that's another story. Now, when weighing up a situation, I always, and I mean always, look at all of the pieces on the board. That includes names, how long they've been part of either side's firm, what was and how much is involved, and of equal importance who lost, how much and who benefits or gains from the incident. Firstly, Bill. Bill was a long-time member and part of my outfit, someone I'd known for many years in varying capacities. He was a good few years younger than me, but acted and walked with an air of confidence and superiority that suggested he'd been on this earth a lot longer than he had. Maybe he just had a longer paper round than all the other kids. He was very disciplined in everything he did, was always smartly dressed and never had a failure or excuse for any bit of work, and he'd been on jobs with not only me, but some of the most known in London. He was a pro, raised by the old guard, and was unquestionably and immensely proper. He was a soldier through and through. No sooner had Bill called telling us that his plane had just landed. Both Jay and I were waiting in the arrivals area for him. As always, relaxed and confident-looking as ever, Bill came walking through the terminal, extending his hand, saying he was grateful I could discuss the issue with him straight away. "Luggage, Bill?" asked Jay. "No, Sparky," said Bill, while giving his trademark smile and wink. I'll admit, it was as fucking puzzling as the Times crossword. What situation would force a man to fly to another country at the drop of a hat, with no luggage, aside from a cabin-sized go-bag, just to have a conversation? But whatever it could be, a warm-lit sunshine weekend was just ahead of us all, and a few cold drinks around the pool would sort it. Bill was all business, he's just built that way, and with his unmeasurable amount of loyalty, no sooner had we walked into the villa, he took off his suit jacket, folded it neatly, placing it over a chair, and began to explain how we'd been fucked over by the same Indian family and Maxi. And as he suspected, it's been since the start of the New Deal that we'd put together some 4+ years ago. It was the best part of, if not close to 15 years, that I was approached by the same Indian family, looking to get some much-needed help, and my services urgently. In turn, I'd given them a lot of protection, ensuring they'd never lose as much as a £1 note under my watch, which they never did, ever. In fact, I'd go as far to make calls, and my presence known when it wasn't always needed, some of which were during my own family's personal events. I simply considered them close and trusted friends. But I will add that they never returned that same level of hospitality down to it being business. But that's fine, as it always said more about me than it did about them. As I'd suspected and Bill witnessed, the family had foolishly lied. At no stage was it ever discussed, nor did they ever disclose, that they were sending multiple consignments of a different nature in the same crate. This was obviously their way of not only concealing the correct amount and type of money, but also something that we'd never have been involved in for any amount of money. Remember, a certain type of commodity is a different type of carrier and price. I wasn't happy, to say the least. They'd taken the piss for too long, and I was tired of them thinking they could pay an apprentice's wages to a fully fledged tradesman. I can't begin to tell you that without me, the amount of people that would have absolutely rinsed them and taken them to the cleaners, even decent villains would have charged at least double what I was billing them, and not accepted anything but payment up front. So, from here on out, business would be business. It would be on my terms, a price of my saying, and without either debate or discussion. Lying, I said, it had been a suspicion of a few key members of the upper-tier chaps within what I do, that the same family had been short-changing me on this bit of work and the agreed price. But what made it that much more insulting was not only their level of contempt towards me and the trust I'd extended to them, but the fact was, I'd bailed out and literally saved the life of one of their top earners. Now, the amount of money in any job is of the utmost importance, but to be stabbed in the back wasn't solely what infuriated me. It was the turning around and seeing who'd placed that knife there. So, I decided on a plan on how to deal with them, making sure they paid the piper, and what should have been paid from the very beginning. Bill, on the other hand, was a lot harder to convince on our suggested somewhat delayed attack. Bill wanted to fly back that same day, deal with them head-on and direct, as the disrespect and insult that had been shown to me was by Bill's standards, a direct attack on the very institution that we all call the criminal fraternity, was a code he was willing to go to war for, and their actions were simply unacceptable. And as he so mildly put it, you don't fucking do it, Carl, and there's rules we all live by and no one gets a pass. I honestly believe when they made Bill, it was with the sole intention of him being a benchmark that we all should and are judged by. His mindset and track record is one that dictates, if he was given the choice or option in changing direction or flipping, he'd rather give his life. He once said to me, You take a man's integrity and morals away, it'd be like removing my arms and legs, and what life is that? We all enjoyed, Bill somewhat reluctantly, a weekend of good food, drink and better company. When Monday came around and us seeing Bill off at the airport and assuring him that no one would be getting a pass, I put into motion a plan to tax the family, put it on them that they'd been sussed and more importantly, they would not be taking the piss. And as Jay added in his usual sarcastic but accurate way, what are they going to do, go against you? Like fuck they will. As regular as clockwork, the family would have us oversee delivery of a large consignment each and every week, but further adding to the headache and process, they would have our drivers do it in 2 runs. This was apparently their way of avoiding any issues, but much like their attitude and deceitfulness, this I was also tired of. Anyone that works in a CP or high-value target business would never allow the client to dictate how the security and route is managed. It causes issues, promotes the chance of unnecessary complications and confusion, plus the insistence of double runs, and the way they constantly changed and added things when they felt it was needed, was never agreed to in the beginning. It cost me twice the manpower and time, and needless to say, was again just their way of saying they never trusted me. And this is after me handling business transactions for almost 15 years, and without so much as a single coin or note being out of place, not to mention the amount of millions of pounds of goods and commodities. So when it came time to set up and confirm the details for the next run, we went along with it as we always did. But of course, and as we predicted, with their usual bullshit reminder of, it is of the utmost importance you only have the very bestest of peoples on this, and we have counted every note several times. Further adding, we have also looked at all the routes and there is no reason for delay as traffic and weather are no issue either. One thing I fucking hate is being patronised. It was time to remind them, I'm the mechanic, and they're the oily rag, and like they say, every dog has its day. The set day and time was upon us, and as usual we got notification that the money was picked up and en route. The day couldn't have gotten any better, as we'd also gotten a nod from someone we'd paid off inside their firm, letting us know the amount in transit was the exact same amount that Maxie had lost when he was sent to earn his first set of stripes. 80k, in used notes, was now both en route and on the table. I called my right-hand man up to check everything was in motion, and as we realised just how well everything was going, we were in absolute fucking hysterics. We were literally beside ourselves with laughter. Call it karma or coincidence, I call it happy fucking days. It was later that evening that my phone had a series of missed calls and what read urgent text messages. I briefly looked over them, and as you can imagine, and to my surprise, the text read that the courier hadn't shown up where he was supposed to be. I thought it must have been a lot of wrong messages and calls to the wrong number, so I went out for the evening with a clear conscience and not a care in the world. The next morning, or being more accurate around lunchtime, I returned to the villa and clumsily walked inside, only to find Jay sprawled out on the villa floor and motionless, but all the while donning the biggest grin and happiest expression I've ever seen on a person's face. He was still holding his phone in his hand when he finally decided to make an effort in slowly standing up, supporting the nearest wall and gracing the world with his fragile and somewhat unsteady body posture and presence. "Good night, was it, mate?" I asked, to which he just fell to the floor and started rolling around in fits of laughter. When he finally got to slow down and find a space amongst the bursts of laughter, he explained that somehow the courier hadn't come through and there was a lot of concern and panic with the now missing money. So, thinking this was surely a mistake, I called the family, only to hear a panic-stricken, out-of-breath Maxie telling me that there was a massive problem as the money had gone missing. I of course calmly said I was as surprised to hear this as anyone, but it was only after him getting a tad too big for his boots, when he demanded an explanation from me and wanted to know why I wasn't answering his calls or texts. Then my tone and mindset changed, and that, as they say, was fucking it. "Listen here, you little shit cunt, you're a fucking no one. You're someone I can make disappear within a second. An absolute waste of my time. And if you ever speak to me again like that, I'll show you for the little slag that you are. Do you understand me, you fucking cretin?" There was an instant string of apologies and excuses then given, rattling on about how it looks bad for him as this has to be fixed, or we'll all be in the shit. "I fucking won't," I reminded him. I'm not sure what else he was mumbling and crying about as I simply placed the phone down on the countertop, walked over to the kettle and began making a nice cup of tea. It couldn't have been better timed, as after the kettle had finished boiling, I then picked up the phone only to hear the little maggot asking, "So what do you think the best thing is to do, mate?" I reminded him I wasn't his mate and I'd have to get back to him. Now, on the scale of things and by my standards, in situations concerning the governing and management of extremely high amounts of used banknotes and who is on the piece of work, was quite important. And if such an incident had occurred, both the money and the courier would need to be tracked down as soon as possible. But I don't need to remind anyone reading this that I knew exactly where both the money and the courier were, in my possession and on my firm. Anyway, fuck him. I wanted to finish my nice cup of freshly made tea by the pool, and last but not least, I needed to shower and get changed, as I'd heard that the new restaurant nearby is top-notch and we'd made reservations. I made a few courtesy calls, so as to show I'd made some sort of effort, as the family themselves had now reached out to me. When speaking to them, I said, I was, of course, concerned, as much as the money going missing, so had my courier. Again, the family expressed the importance and their true nature when they pressed the issue, saying, people can be replaced, but money takes a long time to get. If they didn't have a stained soul before, they surely did now. When they asked if I could come by, they sounded as nervous as they did surprised, when I said with a great level of enthusiasm and conviction, that's such a great idea, I'm on my way, see you within the hour. The person I had next to me laughed and asked why I was going to make such an effort to see them, but as I explained, I'd taken my time in getting back to the UK, and by their standards, I was avoiding the issue. But instead of continuing the so-so attitude, I'd now gone to treating it with a great level of interest, and that would confuse the fuck out of them. Like I said, everything was now on my terms and at my say-so. When we arrived at their HQ offices, well, a porter cabin that was reminiscent of a bombed-out crack den, it couldn't be missed how it displayed all the charms of what should and was probably a condemned unit. When we made our way inside, using the makeshift yet poorly disguised milk crates as steps, we were greeted with nothing more than limp handshakes and, please, my friends, please take a seat. Looking about the room allowed me to come to a simple conclusion, that taking a seat in here would only then force me to get an updated tetanus shot at the local hospital. I politely declined and said I was eager to put this issue to bed, all the while looking directly at little Maxie, who was looking lost for words and remaining very quiet, sitting on a chair in the far corner of the room. I guess he'd not been invited to sit at the table with the grown-ups. I listened to their complaints, concerns, and the overall issue of a missing man, to which I replied, I'm glad you've acknowledged that a human being was part of this equation, as without trusted people in this game, you have nothing, and we'd become no different than the people that I protect you from. There was a short silence, which I was then happy to break. And while we're on the subject of trust, my friend, the consignments haven't always been what they've supposed to be, but that aside, just for one moment, what was agreed upon to be looked after, those amounts and what we've been moving for you, have been a lot more than what was contracted, agreed upon. And to add further insult, you failed to disclose to the very people that have always extended both their hand, as much as their trust and respect. So where and who does that fault lay with you, your brother, or Maxie? And at the mention of his name, I looked directly once again at the still, quiet and cowering boy who remained sat in the corner. Plus, I added, it goes without saying that this isn't the first time a consignment has gone missing, by no fault of anyone, but exclusively under the watch and management of one of your firm, namely Maxie. So, my question to Maxie over there is, where is the money, my man, and who's paying me for both the job and compensation for a member of my firm? He had family, and this remains all on you. A lot of stuttering and assurances of, we'll sort this out and we'll all work together was given, but as I said very firmly before leaving the office, yes, you will sort this out, and you will pay me what I'm owed going back 4 years. What unfolded just over the next week was all I ever needed in terms of concrete evidence on both the lying lowlife that Maxie is and how little the family valued a service they'd gotten from me in over a decade. It was within that same week that a softly spoken but at the same time over-enthusiastic Maxie was on the phone, telling me how they'd gained the services of someone who worked at MI5, but also a private investigator who'd not only been in the employ of 2 of the biggest and known crime families in London, but also crime syndicates around the world. Another call was from what sounded like he was in a fast-moving car, whose occupants were in their teens, loud, incoherent music, and, we're tailing him, we're on him, brother, we're going to get him, and you'll see me go to work on his arse. If anything, Maxie was good entertainment, and was all I needed for a good afternoon laugh. but not a single word he said could be taken seriously, and all I thought was, Jesus wept, Maxie Montana was back, look out world. He sounded like a kid who'd seen a naked woman and gotten his first erection, bought his first Stone Island jumper, and seen his very first gangster film. The very next day, and unbeknown to me, Maxie was now a first-class, world-leading expert on finding missing people's items. As his message read, I found his burner phone, and I know this is his. Not long soon after, he left a voicemail explaining he'd found it in a large bin near a block of flats, and we've finally tracked him down. Plus, wait for it, he'd also found the missing man's wife, who apparently worked in a family-owned jeweller's shop in Hatton Garden. When I heard all of this groundbreaking evidence, I just had to tell someone, and who better than the king of sarcasm, Jay. Jay was just beside himself. I'm sure he'd pissed himself, or at minimum broken a rib, due to his level of laughing. When he did finally get the ability in composing himself, he said, "You have to keep fucking with them. This is too good to pass up." I agreed, as there was nothing better than watching them chase a person of my making and imagination, and their top man, Maxie, who was at the helm of the investigation, was just too much of a level of entertainment, and like the old saying goes, give someone a long enough rope and they'll do the damage all themselves. So, the next opportunity and request for an update and to keep us in the loop, we agreed to a time and a place to meet with the family and the private investigator, who had apparently, with the joint efforts of Maxie Clouseau, had found the missing man and his location. We pulled up at the address given, which was an all-too-familiar location, one of their many lots, a porter cabin and what seemed to be an endless supply of mindless minions, who always appeared to be just milling and floating about, serving no real purpose in life and with no direction or objective. Walking towards the office, I was greeted, called and welcomed inside one of the glass-mirrored offices that on every occasion before I was always forced to wait outside, whatever the weather. Stepping inside, I was initially surprised by a somewhat improved, albeit standard setup, a solid floor and no mould on the walls. But then thinking of the excessive wealth and success they'd gained, you'd think they'd at least put some carpet down and a few pictures on the walls. It was also then that I reminded myself that the invitation, location, and where I was standing was once again a reflection of how little they respected or valued my support and the unparalleled service they'd been given for so long, as previous meetings that were to measure the consistent, large amounts of money I'd ensured were made and protected for the family, I was made to wait outside. Or if I was invited to some form of shelter and accommodation, I was sat in a porter cabin with a leaking roof and an unstable floor. Yet here, they were willing to over-accommodate, in terms of a presentable, clean and stable meeting place for a total stranger, such as this leading PI. Their opinion and view of me was as clear as day, a slap in the face of what we do, and their actions was one of disdain and disrespect, not only to me, but also to proper people and villains, the likes of which they saw as beneath them. I'd had enough and was going to flop on them once and for all. Maxie, of course, was doing a job befitting his natural ability, due diligence, and was guarding what appeared to be salmon sandwiches and bottles of Perrier water, and no sooner than we walked in, we were approached and treated, once again with limp handshakes and false smiles. Taking note of who else was around, I assumed was their PI by his involvement of the spreading out on the table of large black and white photos, but by his looks had missed a good few steps on the ladder of recovery. It was nothing less than cringeworthy to hear Clive, the PI's analysis of what had happened to both, the missing lump of cash and our missing man. What was supposed to be evidence was nothing short of theories, ill-educated guesswork and random out-of-focus photos, showing nothing more than the backs of people's heads, some random high street, a very nondescript warehouse and different parts of London. I'd honestly would have been embarrassed to have admitted to anyone that I'd paid for the services and work that had been shown and then put in front of me. After hearing the expert's view and insight, watching the incessant nodding of their heads in agreeance of the findings, I could no longer control myself and I had to put it on them, letting them know how fucking stupid they were. My first aim and target were the two heads of the family who I reminded that after almost 15 years of grossly underpaid service and exploited and misused loyalty, they were and had been duped on this run by no one else than me. I went on to explain that the person they were looking for and apparently tracked, found and was ready to pounce on was in fact a person of my own imagination and didn't even exist. And before they had chance to make comment, I brought to their attention how their contempt and greed will now cost them dearly. The years of them lying about the size, types, and nature of the consignments was done with such a level of arrogance, ignorance, and disrespect. It not only jeopardized the safety of the people involved, but also my name, and that would not be tolerated by the likes of them. It was then I added that the missing 280k was a tax, a sort of back pay, and was only just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what I was owed, and before they could make any effort in defending their actions with, "But this was the first time," and all that bollocks, I reminded them there was equally, if not more credible evidence this wasn't, and as much as I couldn't prove there was a lot more in past shipments, they couldn't prove otherwise either, because the only people that had been caught out and proven to be lying was themselves. Next, I took aim at Maxi Montana, reminding him not only of his countless fuck-ups and schoolboy errors, but his ability, standing, and well-being was only as a result of me, and me alone. How on many occasions that I'd vouched for him to proper money and connected people that would have, on any other day, had him over a barrel, and not only taken him for every penny he had in front of him, but also what he owned. And finally, their PI, whose only comment was somewhat of a compliment, when I said that I had to take my hat off to him for squeezing the parasites who'd hired him out of at least 10k, and what I know is the amount he'd asked for in fees. I'd really pissed on all of their cornflakes, and at first I thought they were all going to burst into tears. They just stood there, totally motionless. But after looking at each other with the saddest puppy dog-looking eyes, and after a few ums and ahs, and what must have been the most embarrassing and uncomfortable few minutes of their spineless lives, one of the only things softly muttered by one of the family was once again a sign of their true colours and a testament to what matters more than any amount of integrity or moral standing in their world. So, you had the money. I was for once simply lost for words. They didn't even try and deny, defend, or justify that they'd been caught out lying, or even make an attempt at giving reason for their underhanded and scamming ways against me. They'd not yet considered the fact that they'd now crossed me and was going to be in the big bad world unprotected, but again with the money. My parting comment was what sealed the deal and under my terms, and that was, if you want to ever do business with me again, you'll pay the back pay, plus anyone you approach will from here on out know of your excessive greed and willingness to rip them off, and also everyone, including villains, whether old school or otherwise, will now see you as a target, as you, gentlemen, are now in open territory and fair game. As of writing this, I've no doubt Maxi Montana has been given a lot less opportunity and promise of a fruitful career and existence. The family will now have to tiptoe through their business deals, as the money they move and the commodity they're involved in is for the best part, unprotected and up for grabs, literally. And as for me and my crew, well, we are a lot better off as a result of what was nothing more than dead weight.